At 11:58 p.m. on a Wednesday that had worn you thin, the mailbox clicked. You weren't expecting anything. The world had felt a step removed lately, voices dulled, days blurring, like you were living just slightly out of phase. But the envelope was real. Midnight blue, with gold script that shimmered in the porch light. Heavy, velvety paper. It felt like something from another time. The writing on the front was simple. The Midnight Express to Star Valley, for dreamers only. You turned it over. No return address. No instructions. Just a faint scent of lavender and wood smoke. You opened it. Inside, a ticket. Deep blue, edged in foil. Embossed with your full name. The wind shifted. You looked up. And there, at the end of your quiet suburban street, where no tracks had ever run, stood a train. Silent. Gleaming under the moonlight. Midnight blue with gold trim. Not steaming. Not idling. Just waiting. And you knew, you were meant to board. You didn't remember putting on your shoes, but they were on your feet as you stepped outside, clutching the ticket like it might vanish. The air was crisp, slightly electric, the kind of night that made everything feel a little more possible. As you reached the train, the door eased open with a gentle sigh. A man stood inside the vestibule. Older, soft-eyed, with a silver pocket watch and a conductor's cap stitched with stars. Right on time, he said, and gestured you inside. Warmth met you at the threshold. Not just the temperature, but the kind of warmth that came from belonging. The scent of cinnamon, paper, and old wood surrounded you. Velvet carpets muffled your steps. Light glowed from Art Deco sconces along the paneled walls. Your name was written in gold on a little card affixed to the door of cabin 707. As your hand reached the knob, the door opened on its own. Inside, the room welcomed you like an old friend. There was a small fireplace in the corner, quietly crackling. A thick armchair beside it. A bed already turned down with a quilt in your favorite color. A window framed the rolling night beyond, misty hills, silvered lakes, forests that whispered with every passing tree. You stepped in, and the door shut softly behind you. On the writing desk was a single folded note. Welcome aboard, dreamer. You sat on the edge of the bed. You should have been questioning everything, how a train had appeared from nowhere, how this room seemed built for you, but none of it felt wrong. It felt like something you'd been waiting for without knowing it. The hum of the train was a lullaby. You placed your ticket on the desk and leaned back in the chair, staring out the window. The stars outside didn't look real. They looked painted, bold brushstrokes of gold on midnight. A faint knock interrupted your thoughts. 3 soft taps. You stood, heart tapping back, and opened the door. A woman stood in the hall. Her dress shimmered like smoke. She held a small envelope and smiled gently. Welcome, she said. I'm Mira. Just checking that everything's to your liking. You nodded. Yes. It's more than I expected. She handed you the envelope. When you're ready, this will tell you what comes next. She turned, her shoes silent on the carpet. No rush. Time behaves kindly here. The envelope was unsealed. Inside, another handwritten note. Each carriage of this train holds a gift. Some comfort, some clarity, some memory. You'll know when to move on. Below that, in smaller letters. Tonight, rest. Tomorrow, the library. You set the note beside the ticket. pulled the quilt over your lap. The fire had softened to embers. Somewhere beyond your door, music floated, a lone saxophone, playing a lullaby to no one and everyone. You closed your eyes. The train moved like a dream through a world stitched from sleep. You weren't sure if you'd drifted off or simply drifted deeper into this strange waking peace. You dreamed of fields with stars in the grass, of lakes that whispered names, of a cat with a crooked ear who spoke in riddles and vanished before answering. When you stirred, the fireplace had rekindled itself. On the table was a steaming mug you hadn't seen before. Chamomile and honey. Or maybe something older. It smelled like your grandmother's kitchen. You wrapped your hands around it and sat by the window. The world outside had changed. No longer hills and lakes. Now, clouds. You were above them. The train glided through a sky stitched with moonlight. The stars moved beside you, not above. One blinked at you. You blinked back. Then came the sound of small paws. You looked down. A cat stood in the doorway. Orange? Crooked ear. Just like the one in your dream. He sauntered in like he owned the place, leapt onto the bed, and curled into a ball. "Well," you said aloud, "I guess it's your cabin too." He purred. A new card had appeared on the desk. Carriage 3, the Library of Living Stories. You touched the paper, and it felt warm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. You weren't ready to leave the cabin just yet. But you weren't afraid to. This wasn't escape. This was something else. Healing, maybe. Or remembering. You lay beside the cat and pulled the quilt up to your chin. The hum of the Midnight Express sang you to sleep. Outside, the stars watched. Inside, you dreamed. You woke to silence, not empty, but expectant. The fire had dimmed to a soft glow. The cat was still curled up, one paw twitching in a dream. The card on the desk still glowed faintly. Carriage 3, the Library of Living Stories. You stood and stretched, pulling the quilt tighter around your shoulders for a moment before you dressed. Slippers waited at the foot of the bed. Your favorite kind. You hadn't brought them. Outside your cabin, the hallway was lit by soft amber sconces, the carpet thick and soundless beneath your feet. You passed only one other passenger, a man in a wool cardigan who tipped his head in polite greeting. He looked familiar in a way that didn't need explanation. Carriage 3 waited at the end of the hallway. The doors opened without sound. A hush fell over you as you stepped inside. It wasn't just a library, it was a cathedral of stories. Shelves reached the ceiling, spiraling upward in impossible dimensions. Ladders drifted past on their own. Light came not from bulbs or windows but from the books themselves, their spines glowing softly, like sleeping fireflies. There were reading nooks nestled into the walls, cushioned and curtained. Armchairs that seemed to sigh when someone sat in them. Teacups that refilled themselves beside readers who had lost track of time. Mira was waiting. She stood at a table in the center of the carriage, a stack of books beside her. She smiled when she saw you. "Good morning," she said. "Or whatever hour it is where you are." You glanced at the nearest shelf. The titles were familiar. Dreams I Forgot, Memories I Was Too Young to Keep, Stories My Heart Knew Before My Mind Did. "These are," you started. "Yours," Mira said. "Or reflections of yours. Each passenger's library is a little different. The train remembers." You reached out to touch a volume. It vibrated faintly beneath your fingers. "That one reads itself aloud," Mira said, "walking with you. Some whisper. Some sing. Some just need to be held." You opened the cover. Your own handwriting filled the first page. It was from a journal you'd lost when you were 10. The story read itself in your voice, your 10-year-old voice, halting, hopeful, and bright. You listened for a long time. Later, you curled up in one of the armchairs near the window. Outside, the clouds had cleared, revealing mountains capped with snow and valleys lit by moonlight. The landscape shifted like a living painting, as if drawn from your most peaceful memories. A soft flutter beside you made you look up. A book had landed in your lap. You hadn't chosen it. The cover read, "The Day You Almost Gave Up." You opened it carefully. Inside were scenes you remembered all too well, and others you hadn't realized were still with you. Words you'd heard, moments you'd buried. But with each page, the pain softened. The narrative bent not to tragedy but to survival. To resilience. You didn't cry, though your throat tightened. The book closed itself when you finished. It rested lightly in your hands, like something grateful. Mira appeared again. Some stories carry weight. But they don't have to carry it forever. You nodded, unable to speak. A new book floated your way. This one was blank. "What's this?" you asked. She smiled. "That one's for what comes next." You looked around. Dozens of passengers sat quietly in corners or alcoves. Some reading. Some listening. One older man was writing into a fogged up window. The letters vanished as quickly as they appeared. "Everyone here has stories," Mira said. "We carry them. We live by them. We dream through them. This train just lets us hear them again. And choose which ones we take with us." You spent what felt like hours there. Maybe it was. The cat found you eventually, hopping up beside you and nuzzling the blank book. You laughed. "What do you think I should write?" He meowed once. Clearly. "Something softer," you translated aloud. He purred. You stayed until the lights began to dim slightly, signaling the end of the visit. As you stood to go, Mira placed a small envelope in your hand. "Next stop's a favorite," she said. You opened it. Carriage 5, the dining car of thoughtful meals. You looked back one last time. The book still glowed. The shelves still swirled upward. Somewhere in the distance, someone began to sing, an old lullaby you didn't know you remembered. The cat followed you out. You returned to your cabin. The fire had rekindled itself. The quilt was freshly folded. On the desk, the blank book now waited beside a new pen. You smiled. And on the window, drawn in soft condensation, were the words. "You're still writing. Keep going." You turned off the light. The train rolled on. The dining car was quieter than expected. You imagined clinking plates, maybe the low murmur of conversation, but here, the air felt more like a study than a restaurant. The walls were dark walnut, polished and warm. Lanterns glowed golden over each table, casting soft halos of light. You stepped inside, and the scent met you immediately: fresh bread, cardamom, something slow cooked and savory beneath it all. It didn't trigger hunger so much as it wrapped around you like a memory. The meals you never rushed. The ones that made you pause. A host greeted you with a nod and no words. You didn't need to explain. He led you to a window booth lined in velvet, where the stars rolled lazily by. A small card on the table read, "Think it, and it will come." So you thought. Not about steak or fancy things, but about grilled cheese the way your dad used to make it, with the buttery corners a little too crisp. And tomato soup, not perfect, but comforting. You blinked once. It was there. Steam rose in gentle spirals. You took a bite. It was exactly right. Other passengers dined alone or in pairs, all quiet, all content. At the far end of the car sat a woman in a feathered hat writing postcards. Across from her, a man watched raindrops roll down the window even though no rain fell outside. You savored every bite. Midway through your meal, someone approached. The old poet you had seen before, tweed coat, silver beard, fingers ink stained. He bowed slightly. "Mind if I sit?" You gestured to the seat across from you. "I find this car particularly nourishing," he said, settling in. "Not just the food. The reminders." He nodded toward your plate. "The grilled cheese?" You asked, amused. He smiled. "Not just that. The part of you that wanted it. Sometimes we forget what fed us, what made us feel okay." You chewed thoughtfully. He pulled out a small notebook. "I write poems based on what I smell in this car. Care to hear one?" You nodded. He read a short verse about butter and longing, about soup as apology, about dinners that said "I see you" when words couldn't. You didn't speak. You didn't need to. When he stood, he left a page from his notebook folded beside your plate. One line circled. "There are flavors only memory knows how to make." Dessert came without request. Your grandmother's banana bread. Still warm. Still perfect. Tears sprang to your eyes before you could stop them. You closed them, tasted slowly, let yourself remember. The kitchen light. The humming. The gentle way she used to rest a hand on your shoulder. A bell chimed gently. The cat entered. He leapt onto the empty seat beside you and blinked as if to say, "Took you long enough." He sniffed your plate, turned in a slow circle, and curled into a nap. You placed your hand lightly on his back. Outside the window, the landscape had shifted again, now vast fields glowing faintly under the stars, like someone had spilled light across the earth. A server brought you a teacup. You didn't order it. Didn't need to. It tasted like peace. You lingered. Not because you weren't full, but because you didn't want to forget this feeling. Eventually, you stood. The cat followed. On the table, where your plate had been, now sat another envelope. You opened it. Carriage 7, the dome of whispering stars. You folded it gently. Pocketed it. As you left the dining car, you passed the poet again. He raised his glass. "To nourishment," he said. You nodded. "To remembering." The train sighed onward through the night. The carriage doors opened onto velvet darkness. Unlike the others, this one had no walls, just a vast dome of glass arching overhead and all around, revealing the infinite sky. You stepped in and gasped softly. Stars, thousands of them, spun and shimmered across the black canvas above. They felt closer than usual, close enough to touch, to name. You instinctively reached for one, and it twinkled in response. Cushions and blankets covered the floor in soft, inviting piles. Lanterns glowed with gentle blue light, like moonlit water. A few other passengers were already there, some curled up in silence, others lying flat on their backs with eyes closed and peaceful smiles on their faces. You found your place near the center, where the view stretched endlessly. The cat joined you again, leaping onto a cushion with a soft thump and curling into a warm ball against your side. As your eyes adjusted, constellations began to shift, not in the way they do in textbooks, but as if they were alive. They moved slowly, gracefully, and their shapes were nothing you recognized. One looked like a cradle. Another resembled a door. One pulsed gently in time with your breath. A voice, low and melodic, drifted through the dome. Not spoken, not sung, somewhere in between. You realized it wasn't coming from a speaker. It came from the stars themselves. "You are safe," one seemed to say. "You are known," whispered another. "You are not alone." A blanket wrapped itself around your shoulders. You didn't question how. Your body relaxed deeper than it had in weeks. Maybe months. Maybe longer. More constellations appeared, some clear and close, others so distant they were barely threads of light. With each passing minute, a story played out across the sky. One showed a young child lost in the woods, finding a glowing thread and following it home. Another showed an old man who bottled moonlight in glass jars and left them for strangers to find. Another, a woman asleep in a garden of stars, letting go of sorrow like petals into wind. Each story was wordless, but you understood them all. You weren't sure how long you stayed. Time blurred again, unspooling like ribbon. You watched, you listened, you remembered how to be still. At some point, Mira arrived. She sat quietly beside you for a moment, watching the stars with you. "The dome shows you what you need," she said. "Not always what you want. But always what helps." You nodded slowly. The cat purred in agreement. "Some passengers cry here," she added. "Some fall asleep and wake up changed. Some see their childhood pets." You looked at her. "And me." She smiled. "You're listening. That's enough." Above, the stars dimmed slightly, signaling the end of this leg of the journey. A new card drifted down into your lap, seemingly from the ceiling itself. You opened it. Carriage 9, the Hall of Forgotten Lullabies. Mira stood and stretched. Another favorite. A soft one. You remained where you were for a while, staring up as the stars began to fade into the soft glow of dawn, though no sun could be seen. Only light, gentle and forgiving. The cat stretched and stood, waiting patiently. You gathered your blanket and followed him. The dome whispered as you left. "Come back when you need to remember." You nodded. "I will." The entrance to carriage 9 was made of deep indigo velvet, part curtain, part doorway, part memory. As you stepped through, the space opened not with grandeur, but with hush. It looked like dusk, soft blue lighting shimmered from crystal sconces. The walls were lined with what looked like floating music sheets, drifting in the air like feathers, held aloft by some gentle enchantment. You took a breath and instantly felt the tightness in your chest begin to release. Music played here, not loud, not showy. Just familiar. Half-remembered tunes hummed through the air like wind through tall grass. The kind of lullabies you couldn't name, but had once soothed you to sleep in the safest moments of your life. Benches and cushions circled the car like a gathering space. People sat with eyes closed. Some swayed gently. A few whispered along with words they thought they'd forgotten. The cat padded in beside you, then curled up beneath a seat shaped like a crescent moon. At the center of the room stood a woman in a moss-colored shawl, holding a harp carved from something that shimmered like stardust and birch bark. Her eyes were closed as she played, but her music saw you. She strummed a minor chord, and for a moment, it felt like your whole soul shifted. Something inside you, long buried, rose to the surface. You remember the sound of your mother's voice when you were too tired to cry. You remembered a tune your grandfather whistled while making tea. Tears didn't fall. They floated. Mira appeared at your side, speaking barely above a whisper. "This carriage is where we store what people forget too soon," she said. "Songs sung once and lost. Comforts that faded. It's a place to remember without words." A paper bird glided past your head. On its wings were the notes to a melody you used to hum while staring at the rain. You reached out. It landed on your shoulder, weightless. The music filled your ears again. Across the room, a child hummed in harmony with the harpist, eyes closed, hands resting on a stuffed toy you hadn't noticed before. Her guardian held her gently. You sat. The music changed. It was your lullaby now. Not one you remembered consciously, but your body knew it. Your bones leaned into it. Your heart slowed to meet its rhythm. You closed your eyes. A dream took shape, not fantasy, but memory rewritten gently. You were a child, swaying in a rocking chair. Someone you loved held your hand. You were not afraid. You were held. Time passed, or didn't. When you opened your eyes, a song still played, though different now. The kind of melody that follows you for years. Passengers around you had begun to hum together, the sound soft and unified, like a choir made of breath. One by one, they stood, bowing silently to the harpist as they left. You followed. As you stepped toward the exit, the harpist opened her eyes. "Yours is a gentle soul," she said. "Don't let the noise of the world make you forget that." You nodded, your throat too full to reply. Mira handed you another envelope as you crossed back into the corridor. Carriage 11, the Conservatory of Still Mornings. You didn't open it right away. You needed a moment longer with the hush inside you. The cat brushed against your leg, then walked ahead, tail high, already leading the way. The lullabies stayed behind you, echoing. But one of them, yours, now followed you like a companion. The next carriage smelled like dew. It opened into something impossibly wide and green. Morning light filtered through glass panels that stretched high overhead, curving into a delicate dome. Ferns, ivy, and pale blue flowers climbed the walls. Trees, actual trees, stood rooted in corners, their branches dotted with birds too quiet to be real. A soft mist clung to the air, the kind that kissed your skin without making it wet. Benches of polished wood curved around quiet pools where koi circled slowly. Wind chimes tinkled from unseen breezes. Somewhere nearby, water trickled over smooth stone. The cat darted ahead, weaving between your feet, then leapt into a sunny spot on a bench, curling into a nap like he had personally claimed the entire room. You followed slowly. A soft chime rang out. Not mechanical. A bell? A breath? You couldn't tell. "Welcome to the conservatory," said a voice. A man stepped forward. He wore a pale green tunic and gloves dusted with earth. His hands looked like they had spent decades planting things. His eyes, however, looked younger than spring. "This place is for being," he said. "Not doing. Not reflecting. Just being." You nodded slowly. You didn't feel like talking, and he didn't seem to expect you to. He offered you a small glass of something clear and cold. You drank. It tasted like rain. You found a seat beside a window. The landscape outside showed a garden that shimmered and breathed, even though you were sure it was just a painting. Birds sang only when you exhaled. The light never shifted too fast. You sat for a long time. No one asked anything of you. Time moved differently here. It didn't pass so much as float. A young girl near the koi pond was reading aloud to herself, her voice the only sound for a while. An older woman in a red scarf tended to a plant that glowed faintly at its leaves. A pair of twins played checkers, the pieces made of glass. Mira appeared from a path of ferns, barefoot. "Stillness is powerful," she said. "Most of us never get it long enough to know that." You looked at her. "Why do I feel like this place was made for me?" She smiled. "Because it was." You touched a flower growing from a vine nearby. It leaned gently toward you. A bird flew down and rested on the bench near your knee. It didn't chirp. Just sat with you. "I don't want to leave this one," you whispered. Mira sat beside you. "You don't have to. You can always return. The train remembers." A small envelope floated down from the top of the tree above you. You caught it. "Carriage 13, the mirror cabin." You sighed, not ready. Mira nodded. "That one asks more of you. But you're ready." The cat meowed once, stretched, and jumped down. Stillness had filled you. Not to be hoarded, but carried. You stood, took one more breath of that rain-scented air, and followed the quiet path back to the hall. The conservatory whispered nothing. And that was the gift. You stepped into carriage 13 and were greeted not by music or light or fragrance, but silence, absolute and waiting. The cabin's interior was smooth, circular, and entirely paneled in mirrored glass. Every surface shimmered slightly, not cold, but not warm either. The lights overhead glowed dimly, as if they too were unsure of their place. Your own reflection met you from every angle, not just your current self, but shades of you. Younger. Older. Angrier. Tired. Joyful. The expressions changed even when you didn't move. The cat entered behind you, paused, and then padded to a spot in the very center of the room. He curled into a ball, surrounded by dozens of sleepy cat reflections, and promptly closed his eyes. You didn't want to move. You didn't want to see more of yourself. But something about this cabin made it impossible to hide. A single chair waited in the center. You sat. The reflections shifted. Not just mirrors now. Memories. You saw yourself as a child, standing in a classroom, trying to speak up but swallowing the words. You saw your teenage face after a cruel comment. You saw joy you'd forgotten you'd felt, dancing barefoot in the rain, singing in the car alone at night, laughing so hard your stomach hurt. Then the harder ones came. A version of you walking away from someone you should have hugged. A version curled on the floor, holding your breath because crying felt dangerous. A version staring into a mirror, asking, "Why am I like this?" You looked away. But the room didn't let you. Instead, One wall became a single pane. One reflection. You, now. You stared. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, your reflection spoke. "You've carried so much," it said gently. You opened your mouth, but no sound came. "You've been kinder to others than to yourself," it continued. "You've forgiven things you've never admitted hurt you." Tears began to slip down your face. "You are not broken. You are not a mistake. You are still becoming." You nodded. That was all you could do. The reflection raised its hand. You raised yours. They touched the glass. For a moment, it felt like you touched hands with something deeper. Then the wall shimmered and cleared. On the far side was a door. Another envelope waited. You stood slowly. The cat stretched, yawned, and followed. You didn't feel fixed. You felt real. As you opened the door and stepped through, you looked back. The mirrors had gone still. You whispered, "Thank you?" And somewhere in the glass, your reflection smiled. You opened the envelope. Carriage 15, the garden at the end of the line. You breathed in deeply. Almost there. The carriage beyond the mirror door opened to twilight. The garden at the end of the line was not a room. It was a world. You stepped into a landscape that stretched forever in soft blues and silvers. The air smelled of earth after rain. Tall grass swayed in a breeze that you couldn't feel, but which touched everything gently. Trees bent toward one another as though deep in conversation. The path beneath your feet glowed faintly with each step. The cat ran ahead, darting down the trail like it already knew the way. You followed. Fireflies blinked around you, not yellow, but soft white. Lanterns hung from low branches, flickering as if exhaling. Some passengers were already here, walking slowly, hand in hand, or sitting beneath trees alone in peaceful silence. None of them spoke. You didn't need them to. At the center of the garden stood a wide wooden bench under a flowering tree with silver leaves. Mira waited there. She patted the space beside her as you approached. You sat. "Most passengers don't remember this place when they wake," she said. "But everyone carries something of it with them." You looked up. The sky was full of stars, but no moon. Just gentle light from above, as if the world had agreed to be kind tonight. Mira handed you a small object. It looked like a seed, smooth and black with a faint shimmer. "This is yours," she said. "For when you're ready to plant something new." You turned it in your fingers. "Do I take it home?" She smiled. "It goes wherever you need it. Maybe it's a choice. Maybe it's a change. Maybe it's just a reminder." She stood and stretched. "You can stay as long as you like. But the train moves soon. We're almost at the last stop." You nodded. "Star Valley." Myra's smile deepened. "You'll know it when you see it." She walked away, leaving you beneath the tree. You sat there for a long time. Birds began to sing, not sharp or shrill, but soft and searching, like the sound of waking from a dream you wanted to remember. The seed warmed in your hand. You placed it in your pocket. The cat returned and leapt onto the bench. He rubbed his head against your side, then looked up as if to say, "Come on. It's time." The lanterns along the path had begun to dim, signaling departure. You stood and followed the light. As you stepped back into the corridor, one last envelope waited. You opened it. Carriage 20, Star Valley. The final stop. The carriage was empty. No plush chairs. No music. No glowing lanterns. Just an arched glass doorway and a stretch of silence beyond. The door opened. The cat slipped out first. You stepped onto soft earth. Not a platform, no station in sight. Just a wide open space where the train tracks stopped, as though they'd never been meant to go farther than this. You stood in a valley of quiet light. The air felt like dawn. Pale gold mist clung to the hills. Wildflowers dotted the meadow, some familiar, some impossible. Trees arched overhead like cathedral windows. The sky above wasn't night or day but some gentle in-between. Soft blue. Gentle pink. A few stars still visible. A moon, barely there. A sign, carved in old wood, stood beside the tracks. Star Valley. No directions. No promises. Just a name. And somehow, that was enough. You walked. The cat stayed close. Your footsteps made no sound. Ahead, other passengers had begun to gather, each discovering the place at their own pace. Some sat. Some wept. Some laughed. A few simply stood still with eyes closed, as if remembering something their heart had always known. You passed a stream so clear it reflected dreams instead of sky. You saw yourself, smiling, yes, but also whole. You kept walking. Mira stood on a ridge just ahead. She didn't wave this time. She just waited. You reached her. "This is it?" you asked. She nodded. "You've arrived. It feels like." "Yes." You didn't need to finish. Star Valley wasn't a destination. It was a return. A remembering. A resting. She gestured behind her. "You can stay here. As long as you like. Until you're ready." You looked across the valley. Some passengers had built small fires. Others wandered through the tall grass. The world felt soft around the edges. Nothing pushed. Nothing demanded. And there, near a wide tree, you saw a space made just for you. A blanket. A lantern. A journal beside a stone. The cat was already curled there. You walked to it. Sat down. Listened. The wind carried lullabies and poems in starlight. And after a while, you realized, you weren't dreaming. You were resting. You were home. The midnight express would return for others, as it always had. But for now, the train sat still, steam fading like a sigh. And Star Valley held you. Whole? You don't remember falling asleep in Star Valley. You remember warmth. The weight of the cat curled at your side. The hum of the earth. The hush of trees. And then, light. You wake not in your bed, but on the train again. Cabin 707. The fire softly glowing. The blanket tucked around you. You sit up slowly. The train isn't moving anymore. It's quiet, but not empty. A cup of tea waits for you. Your favorite. Steam curling upward like it knows where it's going. The ticket is gone. In its place, the seed Mira gave you. You stand. The door to the hallway is open. The train is no longer outside your home, or on tracks. It simply is. Like it was never a train at all, but something older. Something gentler. Something made to carry not bodies, but burdens. You step out. The conductor is there. Thank you for traveling with us, he says. You may not remember everything, but something will stay. You nod. Will I ever come back? He tips his cap. Some passengers do. Some just carry it forward. Outside, your street is just waking. The porch light is still on. The morning is cool. You walk home with the cat trailing behind you. Inside, nothing has changed, and yet, you have. There's a journal waiting on your desk. Blank pages. A pen beside it. You sit. You begin to write. Not because you remember it all, but because what you felt was real. And that's enough.